This is Voice of the Bus, Mark Johnson, and you're listening to the Folsom Frenzy Podcast.
Welcome to the Folsom Frenzy Podcast. My name's Chase. I'm here with Sreyas and Topher tonight. Jake couldn't make it, which is pretty convenient considering the defense also did not show up to the game this past weekend. We're here to break down the unfortunate Kansas loss. Heartbreaking. Sreyas, you were there for the game, so I don't know if you want to lead off this afternoon.
I didn't make it this time, and I'm kind of glad.
Okay.
I'll stay away from that cursed stadium, man. It hasn't been good for Colorado football teams this year. That's for sure.
And I think it goes without saying that we are anti-NFL stadium for college football games. I don't think that's a particularly controversial take. I think most people are behind that, but. I think we just start from the top before, normally we start offense, defense, and then go special teams. But I think, I'm just going to make the executive decision. I think we have to start with the defense and how the defense completely it just absolutely did not show up to the game. And more importantly, 0 punts that game. And what's really amusing, if you guys haven't seen it online, is the punter for Kansas is an Australian punter, and his entire family came out from Australia to that football game, and they got to see their beloved football player play 0 snaps on Saturday because Kansas did not have to punt. Defense, frankly, just looked like a total state of disrepair. And I'll start, and you guys can let me know what you think, but I think now that we've had some time to sit back and think about it, for me, what is the most frustrating is that at some point, I think Livingston has to go, I am tired of being beaten by the running game, and I'm going to put 10 people in the box, or I'm going to, I'm being a little hyperbolic, right? But I'm going to stick 7 or 8 guys in the box and make Jalen Daniels beat us in the air, because Jalen Daniels did not look like a world beater when he had to pass the ball, right? Like, he looked very human when he had to pass the ball. And yet we could not stop the run. And I can't remember, you might have the statistic on your head, Sreyas. You just seem to remember things like these. But it seemed like he had something like 240 combined yards of offense in the first half on the running back. I mean, absolute domination. And what that ends up causing, obviously, is, especially because we were not able to really establish our run game, and we'll get to the offense later, but the defense is tired. The time of possession was totally out of control. And the fact that this game was as close as it was, I think was surprising for a lot of us. Felt like this was one that really could have gotten out of hand. It's just, unfortunately, because so many eyeballs are on Colorado, everyone watched it nationally. This was not a game that we could just wish went to the Pac-12 network and no one ever saw. This was frankly, and Coach Prime acknowledged it, this was a humbling, pretty bad loss and it's just frustrating because we had everything in front of us and couldn't execute. So I'll get off my soapbox. That's kind of the gist of it. But what do you guys think of the defense, the game overall?
Yeah, Chase, this was very reminiscent of the Nebraska game in the sense that we were completely manhandled. And at least in the Nebraska game, we were able to stop the bleeding in the second half and limit the amount of offense that they could put up after that point. But in this game, there was no limitation. They essentially got whatever they wanted. And in fact, I thought a couple of their field goals that they took in the first half were kind of conservative. They probably could have just gone for it on fourth and just pounded it into our face and gotten anything that they wanted. I mean, a couple big stats just to, now that I have it up. Time of possession, 40 minutes and 11 seconds. Are you kidding me? 40 minutes. And I heard on my drive home, I went and watched this with a few other alum in Centennial. And on my drive home, I heard Mark Johnson say it, like they had the ball for 20 more minutes. 20 more minutes. That's outrageous. That is outrageous. You're never going to win. The fact that this was a 2-score game in the end was mind-boggling to me. I know that our offense did leave some points on the board. And we kept it fairly close for a while. And then eventually, man, like some of the hits, we can talk about the hit to Shedeur. Oh my God. I'm glad that he is able to continue playing the sport after that hit. That was very close to being a goodbye, both of your knees, surgically repair whatever is left of it to try to salvage what's left of your athletic career moment. We almost saw something. I mean, that was as bad as it gets. And the offense just never recovered from that, understandably, right? I'm not going to blame the game on that, though. Like, realistically, you give up 333 rushing yards, you let the other team have the ball for 2/3 of the game, you're just toast. I mean, there's not much you can do in that scenario. And the only thing that really differentiates this versus what we've seen in past seasons at CU is Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders. Let's be honest, because, man, Travis did have an amazing game. And on both sides, he looked amazing defensively too. He had a great pass breakup on what could have been a big passing play for Jalen Daniels, right? And so that's where, thinking back on it, like you were saying, Chase, it would have been great if there was a way that we could have, allowed us to challenge Jalen Daniels and made him throw the ball more. But the honest truth is, I felt like, just watching that in real time, it was always one really bad beat where one defensive lineman would be getting rocked by an offensive lineman, and Devin Neal's a good enough. He's not just crafty. The dude's really good. He's probably a next level guy. And he's been playing that way all year in Kansas. Man, there's no reason that team should be fighting for bowl eligibility. When you look at their losses this year too, they were all very close losses, very, very close. I mean, against teams that ended up being pretty good, right? Illinois, 1-score loss. UNLV, 1-score loss. West Virginia, 1-score loss. TCU, that was a 2-score loss. TCU really turned it around this year. ASU, 1-score loss. And then Kansas State, they lost in a walk-off field goal. I mean, these are all coin flip at best type games that, frankly, they should have at least won a few of those, you think. And they're getting what's coming to them now, which is just hurting ranked teams. And frankly, if they'd put away that Kansas State game, that would be 4 straight ranked wins for them. And now they get to play Baylor, who's hot too. So that's gonna be a fun game to watch. I'll probably be watching that game, even if it has no implications. But that was a really good team that we played. They completely dominated us. And nothing we can really do at this point other than take our wounds, go take it out on Oklahoma State, and hope that the chips fall where they may so we can continue playing for something more special than a bowl, which, frankly, for us, like for me, that's still great. But so close to better, What do you think, Topher?
So I rewatched the All-22 film of the defense today, and it's 43 minutes long, right? So typically when you have an All-22 breakdown, it's usually about 30 minutes of each, right? Because you have about half the game. 43 minutes of defensive-only film, and not a single time did we force a punt. Holy moly, that was tough to get through. And it wasn't like any one particular person that had just an awful game that caused all of that. It was, bad run fits, bad scheme, bad man pressure, man pressure. It was man coverage, bad man coverage because we weren't adjusting to the motion. It was DJ McKinney had a really bad game, giving up outside leverage, right? That one touchdown where everyone was all like, Shiloh took a bad angle. No, Shiloh took the angle he was supposed to. DJ McKinney was supposed to have outside contained. He didn't. Gave up the outside and he's gone, right? As a defense, we were not ready to play. And that was unbelievably disappointing just because it had been a crutch that we could rely on, that we had good run fits. We faced good running backs this season, okay? And we did pretty well against them, making sure that, we were there. And I think as a team, we exhibited this behavior where we were trying to tackle from our knees, right? We were trying to hit low, which is what you're supposed to do, but I want you to drive through the tackle, right? You want to keep your cleats dug in and drive him through into the ground. Instead, we had a lot of guys trying to just get on the knees and just wrap up, allowing their guys to fall forward. And that's 2 to 3 extra yards every single run. Kansas looked at it and went, Devin Neal's strong. You try to tackle him from the knees, he's going to fall forward every time. And that's exactly what happened. So We have to lick our wounds. I don't want to say like we're playing with house money at this point. So you got to be happy with
as fans. Let me clarify that we're playing with house money as fans. I think.
Yeah.
I think
sure.
the team is rightfully going to take this very, very personally.
For sure.
I loved Coach Prime's comments after the game. I thought they strongly encapsulated that feeling that a lot of us watching the game had, which is these guys maybe let this get to their head, and they're getting blistered and pounded by. I'll say it again. I really genuinely don't believe that Kansas is a truly inferior opponent. I think that the signs were there that this was a good team, and they just found weird ways to lose games before this. And now they finally found it, and they've got it together, and they've been just they're a wrecking ball in the Big 12. So this is not a slight on Kansas. But when you look at our team, when you give up 333 rushing yards, you don't force a single punt in the entire game. The other team is kicking field goals, and you're thinking to yourself, well, they probably could have just gone for it and gotten it, right? This was a very conservative decision on their part. That is just flat out embarrassing. And I hope, as much as for me, I'm excited. Whatever bowl game we get, I will be there. I'll be super excited. 102 games, 102 CU football games, 0 bowl games. I went to the Celebration Bowl before I went to a CU bowl game. That's how bad it's been. So for me, I will take it. But I hope that this team is still playing with the chip on their shoulder. Maybe they actually need the chip on their shoulder. Maybe they kind of let the chip on the shoulder fall off a little bit after that Utah game. And Kyle Whittingham saying that was the best team that they'd played all season. Maybe they kind of just let it brush off a little bit. But I hope that they come out on Friday and really take it to Oklahoma State, especially offensively, because OSU's kind of struggled on that side, on the defensive side, pretty much all of conference season. Get their 9th win. And hopefully things fall where they may, and all of a sudden, who knows? Maybe we're back at Jerry World and playing for some bigger pictures. A lot of other stuff happened in the playoff picture that was favorable. So it was a kind of a chaotic day, wasn't it, guys?
Yeah, and before we move off defense really quickly, I just want to pose the question of how much is Robert Livingston to blame? And I know that we've been hot on Robert Livingston, and it's funny to me that Jake's not here the one day that Robert Livingston, at least squad, totally lays an egg, right? Like absolutely lays an egg. And for me, thinking about it, a lot of things, they just went the wrong way. But to Topher's point, a lot of tackling without wrapping up. I can't think of how many times we were diving at people without our arms even exposed. We were diving at people trying to just clip them, at the legs, which you can get away with a lot of times, but it's not sound tackling, right? I'm not saying that's the defensive coordinator's fault. What is concerning to me is this is another game where Shiloh was the worst player on the field for either team, like just definitively, right? He was taking horrible routes to the ball. He actually had a good number of tackles, but the reason he had a good number of tackles was he was catching guys at the 2-yard line when you're supposed to be the safety that's supposed to hold everything in, right? Just a really rough game for Shiloh. And like even our like 18-time Q Wealth Management Defensive Player of the Game, Levanta Bentley, wasn't making tackles. And I just don't understand what happened, right? This is a team where Robert Livingston, every game before this, right? We've had games where we started slow, and I was feeling more confident than you guys were at halftime when we scored quickly, and it's like, okay, Robert Livingston makes adjustments better than any coach we've ever seen at CU, other than maybe Jim Leavitt, and we're going to be okay. But I don't feel like we made any adjustments in the second half defensively, or if we did, they really didn't make a difference, right? Our lines were getting pulverized, and I get it. Kansas has a very good offensive line. There's no question about that. But our lines were getting pulverized, and guys were just not making tackles, and how many times did we dive at them? And that happened in the second half. Like that should have been a point of emphasis, right? Anyone on Twitter could have gone on and seen tackling is not sound. Like if I were the coach at halftime, I would say, hey, we're going to spend 10 minutes of halftime talking about tackling, because I've seen middle school teams that do a better job of wrapping up than this team was doing. And that's just those are the foundation parts of the game that you have to have in order to beat a team like Kansas that, to your point, Sreyas, is not that bad. So, hey, maybe this is what keeps Robert Livingston in Boulder next year. We love Robert Livingston. We're not giving up on him by any means, but it was very disappointing to see absolutely zero halftime adjustment. And I don't know, Topher, you subjected yourself to 42 minutes. Did you notice any difference in the second half between the first and second half on Fitz?
No, actually, it was probably objectively worse in the second half than it was in the first half. Kansas made an adjustment. They started motioning into a 4x1 set, and when you do that in a man defense, right? If you run to the one side, run fits are really, really, really difficult because you have 4 DBs on the other side because they have to line up on the 4-1. So you can just inside zone to the other side. And that happened a couple times. They gashed big runs. I really think we looking at this film, DJ McKinney's going to have a really tough time in the film room. I think he gave up outside leverage 4 or 5 times, and it just got exposed every single time. But at the end of the day, they're going to look at this film and they're going to say, this is not us. This is not what we've been about, right? The run fits this game were terrible. Kansas came with a great game plan. They ran that zone run really, really, really well. Warren Sapp is going to look at his guys and be like, you got blown off the ball so much. Too many times we were giving up gap integrity, and it was just creating massive gaps. So it doesn't matter if we had the right fits because the gaps are so massive, right? And then you pile on the fact that we couldn't tackle. It was just a recipe for disaster. At the end of the day, it's like Colorado teams just cannot play an Arrowhead. We just cannot play an Arrowhead. And that's what I think this was. Defense just was like, we're a Colorado team. We don't know how to play football today.
It's the Mahomes voodoo or something, you know. I guess the Mahomes voodoo got us twice this year with Raiola too. So there's something about it. God, you know, Chase, you nailed it when you said Shiloh had 13 tackles. That's a huge problem. And it's not just, yes, Shiloh, headache gang, always going for the big hits. Come on, okay. That's not what's going to win you games, right? It's what gets you highlight reel plays and stuff. I'm not saying that Shiloh's just in it for that, but come on, man. I saw Shannon Sharp and Ocho right before this. I saw what their comments were, and they said that almost verbatim. They were like, man, you got to wrap up. You got to do something. But all that said, why was Shiloh in a position that many times to have to make the hit? Where were our linebackers? Where was our DNs? I mean, when you look at BJ Green had a pretty good game, but when you look at all of our other guys like Amari McNeil, Barnes, Arden Walker, I mean, these are all like less than 4 tackles against a team that ran the ball. How many times did they run the ball? They ran the ball 55 times. They ran the ball 55. That's
not really. I mean, not really to the outside. Like they straight up just ran it down our throat and said, "Stop us," and we didn't. I mean, to their credit, I would run the ball 55 times too. If Devin Neal or not Devin, it is Devin Neal. If Devin Neal is able to get as many yards, he averaged 5.6 yards a carry. I mean, I have to take this stab because he's not here. Jake could have been their offensive coordinator, and he would have called the exact same game plan. He would have said, "Let's run it 37 times to Devin Neal right down the middle," and it worked. Like, why would you change it? You wouldn't make an adjustment, and it's just crazy because, and this is what I said earlier. At some point, you have to think that we would have looked at it and gone, Jalen Daniels is 14 of 21 at the end of the game, 189 yards with 1 touchdown, but he was not spectacular by any means. And if I'm the defensive coordinator, at some point I look at the number of rushing yards they have, and I look at how gassed my guys are, and I say, all right, fine. Jalen Daniels, you go beat Travis Hunter one-on-one, and you go beat, our secondary that is very good one-on-one. And to your point, like Shiloh, yes, he had a lot of tackles. Part of that, problematic. He did not have a good game by any stretch. I don't know what his PFF grade was, but I guarantee you it was not even 60. But when your safety is in the position to make that many tackles, especially when there's as many running yards as there were, a disaster. But we've been going for 20 minutes. All we've talked about is the defense. Not a total disaster of a game on offense. I know there was a lot to be left to be desired, but the good news is, and I'm going to mix 2 topics at the same time. So we'll do the offense, but more importantly, we'll do Travis to win the Heisman, move down to minus 750. which is, for those of you who don't know betting talk, prohibitive favorite. He is now there. I think that's implying essentially like I'm trying to do the math in my head, but 70% chance approximately after the sportsbook takes its cut. 8 receptions, 125 yards, and 2 touchdowns, including a long of 51. He was absolutely lights out. And by the way, played very well on the defensive side of the ball, is what I thought. He did not get torched at any point during the game, was not able to really help with the running. But like I said, they weren't running to the outside a whole lot. They were running straight up the gut every time. So Travis had a phenomenal game. Shedeur had, pretty much a classic Shedeur game, 23 completions on 29 attempts, 266 yards, and 3 touchdowns. When the offense was able to get the ball, they were very successful, I thought. You guys can lean back on that. I think the thing that was left to be desired was absolutely no show by our running game. But to be fair, Augustive hurt early on in the game. I don't know, Topher, you said it was pretty serious. I don't know if they've announced it yet, what it was, but
my gut reaction is I think he broke his collarbone.
But I haven't seen anything announced officially.
The way his arm was hanging after that hit, I was like, oh, that's a really bad sign. That is a really bad sign. And he did not come back after that hit. I would not be surprised that by the time you're listening to this podcast, it's probably announced he's out for season.
Yeah. And our running backs had 8 total carries the entire game. You got to subtract Shedeur's yardage out of there, but 17 total rushing yards by our running back room. Now, part of that is at some point we were so far behind that we just had to yeet the ball down the field and we only had so many opportunities. But, this is a team, and like we've talked about, like we've done well against teams that have to establish the run against us, but part of that's been that we've established the run against them. UCF comes to mind, Utah comes to mind, right? So, I mean, we were not able to play our game the way we wanted to. But I mean, let's give our guy Travis at least some flowers. Ashton Genty fans. Hey, we as a podcast, we love Ashton Genty. We Boise State having a great running back is awesome, but I'm just saying, we called it last episode. It's over. Travis Hunter Heisman Hunter is your Heisman winner this year. I'd be shocked after that performance.
Here's what it comes down to, Chase. Here's ultimately what it comes down to. I see the arguments about the 2,000 yards. Rashad Penny had 2,000 yards at San Diego State a few years ago and I don't even know if he was top 5 in the Heisman, right? So the strength of schedule aside, right? What Genty is doing is incredible, right? He's averaging over 8 yards a carry or something like that. And he's absolutely taking care of business. And in a lot of those games early on, not so much last night, it was over pretty early, and then they were able to give him some rest because he's hurt. I hear everyone's comments on that, but here I know I've kind of beat this drum on this podcast before too. People they're not thinking about value added. They're not thinking about value added. When you look at it, you're thinking to yourself, oh, I want to see eye-popping numbers. Okay, cornerback. Of all positions, it's one of the most important positions, by the way, right? There's a reason why Deion Sanders made such a big name for himself at that position. It is a very, very crucial position. It can completely transform the way that your entire defense functions. If you have a guy who can shut down half the field, the amount of other stuff that opens up is insane. And it's going to be crazy. I really hope that we have a great succession plan. We have something else going on for next year when Colton Hood and DJ McKinney are both very young and they have that kind of potential to be that. But here's the thing, from a value added perspective, when you have a guy that's able to do that for you and then turn around and also put up 1,000 yards, 10 touchdowns, you're just not thinking about the value added. It's insane how much value. That's outrageous.
But Sreyas, what if I'm an AP top 25 voter and I'm concerned that Travis Hunter doesn't have a lot of tackles as a corner?
Hey,
and I
Shiloh
want him to have
Sanders.
That statistic.
That means Shiloh Sanders is the best safety in the country.
Right. I mean, and obviously we're making fun of him, but I mean, what an insane comment. But yeah, I mean, to your point, right? Like truly elite corners are not going to pop off on a statistics page. Like that's the whole point, right? You are a lunatic if you throw at them.
I don't want to
by design.
I'm not just going to throw the NFL out here willy-nilly, but look at the game the Broncos had this year against the Ravens. They got destroyed. Pat Surtain was out for that game. That's seriously, that makes a huge impact. It's that big of an impact. Now, all of a sudden, you can't guarantee that you have this entire part of the field locked down. You can't necessarily like blitz all that much. I mean, you got to be careful with Lamar Jackson anyways, right? And it changed your whole defense, and they got destroyed that game. That was the one game where the Broncos just completely got outclassed. That's what Travis Hunter brings to CU's defense. While also, imagine if Pat Surtain was also Cortland Sutton, right? That's the best comparison I can give you, except Travis has actually put up bigger numbers overall the season, like counting stats, obviously at college level, but still bigger counting stats than Cortland Sutton has. That's one player. Come on, guys. Like the objective hate that Travis Hunter, the subjective hate that he gets is purely, there's only a few explanations for it, right? You hate Dion, you hate Colorado. That's
you're a Boise fan. That's
Boise
fair.
fan.
Fair enough.
I get that.
Fair enough.
I totally get that. But my goodness, and that's a whole other topic that we can get to, is just the absolute pure, I'll say pathological, deranged anger that people have towards Colorado. It's feel free to have that anger. I can't stop you. That's upon the individual to kind of take care of themselves, but it is pathological. And it's from a lot of people who are just in their own echo chamber out there talking to each other and loving everything that they're saying about each other that's totally hateful. While, meanwhile, Colorado fans who've been there and seen where we are like, man, we're headed in the right direction. We got a lot to be optimistic about. It's a whole different topic though. So anyway,
sorry about that, but I do wanted to bring up one thing when talking about that offense. Travis Hunter was absolutely the best player on and off the on offense and on defense. And the one play that he gave up on defense that was kind of a long run on his side is because the goddamn ref tripped him. Right? Which brings me to our next point. The offense, I felt like did the best that they could. I wish they would have established the run more. I wish that we could have scored and been the explosive offense that we were. But at the end of the day, we didn't get to touch the ball that much. We were on the field and we went like 3 for 5 on our drives. 3 for 5. Okay? We were not very successful getting the ball back, and that's because of our defense. But in this game, I need to comment on the officiating. Right? Because everyone is out here saying that, Shedeur should have been, ejected after shoving the ref, which you should never shove the ref. But to ignore the context of the dirty hit to Shedeur, the stepping on Shedeur, and just the blatant misses from the ref. So this is the one from the film review that I saw. This was a touchdown for Kansas here. If you'll look at Nakai Hill-Green right there, that is a bear hug from their guard. All right. He has 2 hands wrapped around his shoulders. That was Nakai's tackle. Okay. David Neal is coming right through here, and that would have been Nakai's tackle. But instead, he's getting bear hugged, and there was no call. And this was over and over and over again. And based on what I've seen from Twitter, this is a crew that is notorious for missing a lot of calls and having a lot of controversy. And all those people on Twitter saying Shedeur should have been kicked out for that. Watch the hit that he took. The flag was picked up. Watch how the guy stepped on Shedeur getting up from the hit where Shedeur shoved that ref, and tell me that you wouldn't be just as fired up, right? Just for integrity of the game, we have to talk about how terribly that game was officiated, just from a game control standpoint. Not even calls going one way or the other, a game control standpoint.
And how much worse was it that they threw the flag. So it's not like they totally missed it. They threw the flag and then picked it up, which is crazy to me. I'm almost positive I recognize this referee from the Pac-12 days. I'm almost positive he came.
That's what I was about to. That's what I'm about to say. He is.
Yeah. But it would be one thing if they just didn't see it. And obviously you have one guy whose entire job is to watch the quarterback and for late hits, but who knows? Maybe they just miss it and don't see it. But to throw the flag and then pick that up. And again, I think you mentioned this earlier, Sreyas. That is not the difference in the game. But that's not the point that we're making. The point that we're making is that Shedeur Sanders is going to be a top 5 in the NFL, top 5 pick in the NFL draft in April. And that kind of hit is the kind of hit that legitimately ends football careers, right? Like and I think you've seen the analysis on Twitter, but if both of his feet are planted and he gets decleated like that, like thank God he was just barely coming down when that happened. He just flipped over. It's scary, but he ends up being okay. But it's just crazy to me, and to your point, like the missed holding calls and the officiating in general, horrific. And the crazy thing is we leave the Pac-12. Everyone's excited to get away from the Pac-12 refs, but the Big 12 goes, oh, we need to hire more officials to accommodate these additional games that we have. Let's hire the Pac-12 refs. And so it's just, unbelievably bad.
So while we're talking about deep dives, I feel like we've mentioned in the last couple pods that it would be good if someone did like some investigative reporting on this, right? Last week, I think the investigative reporting was about kind of the history of Prime leaving Jackson. This time, we got to know how are these refs like really mistreated? Are they just not paid well? Are they given like a bad job? Like I'm genuinely serious because this is such a serial problem. This is such a systemic problem throughout this entire sport, which generates billions and billions of dollars. It makes you wonder whether these guys are just like they're not actually the best of their job. And they're being put in this terrible position and they're completely overmatched and shouldn't be in this position for such a massive industry. It really does beg the question, doesn't it?
All right, it's official. The officiating was so bad that Sreyas has volunteered to become the union representative for the Big 12 officials because they just can't get the games together. I don't know. And I agree. Like
what other explanation is there? Like, because we all thought, okay, we got out of the Pac-12. Like you said, okay, they did have to hire some of these Pac-12 refs and bring them back in. But it's like week in, week out. You see this type of thing happen. You see Utah's AD just go ballistic a couple weeks ago after the Holy War. Although turns out that holding call actually was kind of a good call. There was another angle that showed up that validated it. But nevertheless, like, it's like a daily, weekly occurrence. This is definitely a callback to a past episode. I even remember, like, one of my best friends, I think it was after the Kansas State game, right? Because we had that missed PI call, I think, in the Kansas State game. Every game is the worst game ever officiated. But it seems like the last 2 or 3 weeks, there's been people who are, like, covering these teams as beat writers, avid fans, watching these games and saying, what is going on? This isn't football. This is wild. Like, this is just bizarrely officiated. So it does beg the question, like, is this something systemic in the sport that needs to get addressed? And if so, how what is the NCAA going to do about this? Is this a bigger picture issue where it's going to affect the playoff structure, the conference structure, all of that stuff? But to everyone else's point, that's not why we lost. Just like Kansas State, that's not why we lost Kansas State. It's not why we lost against Kansas either. We got flat out dominated by Kansas's trenches.
Yeah,
you're not going to win.
And one more point I just want to touch on, and this is kind of from the offensive side, but just as a game as a whole, Kansas 9 of 14 on third down, 2 of 2 on fourth down. Colorado 3 of 7 on third down, 0 for 2 on fourth down. Now, when we first got on this call before we started recording, Sreyas made the comment of, thank God the score was at least closer than the game was. But analytics say that we actually should have been in a closer game than we actually were. Analytics say Colorado did not get beaten as badly as the score entails. I think the basis for that is that we just didn't make the plays on third and fourth down. Now, there's some other components there, right? But 9 of 14 on third down. And just very quickly, if you remember, I think it was 3rd and 9, and they run the ball, which is unbelievably disrespectful. But the most disrespectful part about all of it is that they easily got the first down, right? I mean, we just could not get off the field, and that's on defense. But on offensive side, 3 of 7 on third down, 0 for 2 on fourth down, right? Like we left some opportunities on the field for sure. The one that really sticks in my mind is we're on their 40-something yard line, and we go for it. And part of that is because, and we were down big. Field goal probably doesn't do it for you anyway. probably out of the range for Mata. And so you go for it. That is the smart move, right? But those kinds of plays, if you don't get them, they immediately turn around and they go down and score on us, right? And so like those are the things where you can only take so many punches to the mouth. And before the game even started, I said, I really wish we had gotten the ball first. And I don't actually know if we won the coin toss or not. But, deferring to the second half is all well and good. But this is a team that just cannot start fast. And so it would have been really nice to have the ball, go out there and score and put some pressure on Kansas. And it is what it is, but it would have been nice to be able to have that opportunity on the offensive side. At least in my perspective. Now, Topher, I'll let you go first on special teams. Mata was pretty good. And Mark Bassett actually had some decent punts. And he was definitely the best punter in the game, for sure, on Saturday. Unquestionably the best punter in the game.
Without a doubt. Special teams did special teams thing. I want to build on that third down stat a little bit. This is actually a trend for the past 3 games now. We are really bad on third down. As a team, we are really bad on third down. And that was something that I left the Utah game thinking. I was like, we dominated, but I didn't feel like we dominated. And it was because we were bad on third down. If they could get us to third down, I was worried that we were going to have to give the ball back. And that is a feeling I've had for this offense pretty much the whole season. Like every time we get to third down, I'm always anxious because we have an established run, so it's not third and short. So, and because we're not a running team, I don't know if we're running or throwing. I know we're throwing, right? Or we're running a stupid RPO that's going to get stuffed on fourth down, right? Those are the options. So we need to figure out how to be better on third down. And this is a must. I don't know the answer, but this feeling of anxiety on third down, that doesn't exist with good teams, like great teams. And we're not quite there yet. As for special teams, Motto is automatic, right? Like his PATs were high and consistent, and he's feeling his rhythm. Bassett had some great punts. I'm still a little worried on our kickoff coverage. There's still a couple of times where it looked like they were developing a lane and it closed down. But God, we need a kicker that can get it to the end zone. So if you're listening to this podcast and you can get it to the end zone, please go apply at the University of Colorado Boulder.
Yeah, and Sreyas, I'm assuming you don't have anything on special teams because no one cares about special teams, but we always like to give Topher his little special teams segment. Before I'll even let him respond to that, let me go ahead and move us into our Q Health Management Player of the Game. Go to qhealthmanagement.com to learn more. We really appreciate them. They've been with us for, I guess, 2 seasons now. So we are going to go ahead. Travis has to be the Q Health Management Offensive Player of the Game. No question. No question. I know we've already beaten it to death, but I do want to point out that Travis, I think, had 125 yards on only 8 receptions. And turns out the only thing stopping Travis on a lot of those receptions was, in fact, the end zone. I for one, love him doing the Heisman pose in the end zone after the second time because he had his coordinated celebration. But when you're Travis Hunter, you should probably plan for at least 2 or 3 celebrations because you're always going to be scoring those touchdowns. For the first time ever, we have decided to just not give a defensive player of the game. And the reason for that is, really no one played well enough. If we were going to give it, we'd probably give it to Travis as well. But, the defense got absolutely worked. So no defensive player of the game this week. Record breaking. I'm sure it's going to be all over Twitter. And then on special teams,
Travis would agree with you there too, right? He's a team first guy. So
yeah.
I think it's a good call.
And then on special teams, Topher did this on his own. He put Mata. I actually think, and I've been very negative of Mark Bassett several times, and for whatever reason that got people really upset on YouTube comments. But Mark Bassett had a phenomenal game as far as like pinning them. Didn't really have any of his noodle leg kicks that I feel like he frequently does. So I could see that one going either way. It's already in writing that it's going to Mata for the 25th time, but I think it could have gone either direction on that side. So thank you to Q Health Management on this side. Overall, any last thoughts before we start to preview Oklahoma State, fellas?
Yes. One quick thing. Kobe Bryant, you said you were going to lock up Travis Hunter, and he put 125 and 2 tutties on you. So I don't want to hear you talk. Your team may have won. Congratulations, but you didn't do anything against the Heisman.
PFF gave him a good score. That's all I'm going to say. So I might have to go look at the tape there and see who we were actually cooking. Sorry.
His second touchdown, Kobe was playing the flat. Should have carried Travis, didn't. Tutty. That's on Kobe.
There you go.
And I actually made a mistake. We're not going to start previewing Oklahoma State yet. First, we have to talk about the absolute insanity that was this week. not only in the Big 12, in college football generally, right? Ole Miss goes down. Alabama got the absolute brakes beaten off of them. And thank God, Colorado was not the most embarrassing loss on Saturday. It was definitively Alabama losing by, I think, 21 points to Oklahoma at Oklahoma. And, at least we didn't have a field storm happen. But let's talk Big 12 situations, of course. You've got BYU going down to Arizona State. Boy, Arizona State sure does look like the real deal. And, this is – we talked about this at the beginning of the year where the excitement of the Big 12 is the fact that literally the conference is wide open. There's no clear king in the Big 12 anymore, right? Texas and Oklahoma are gone, and it's wide open. And no season will ever prove that more than this season, unquestionably, right? The teams that were picked to be last, a lot of them competing. Now, Colorado has to take a look, and we have to cheer for our self-interest. And it's my understanding, correct me guys if I'm wrong, but we either need a BYU loss. Of course, we have to win. No question. We have to win against Oklahoma State. We'll talk about that game here in just a second. But if we win, we either need a BYU loss against Houston, who frankly has been terrible, not counting that one, or both Iowa State to lose in Farmageddon and Arizona to beat Arizona State, which we're conflicted on this one. I'll just quickly preview Arizona versus Arizona State. It's a rivalry game. I'm just saying, who knows? Anything can happen in that game. The Territorial Cup, it really matters. Territorial Cup is one of the better, we talked about the Holy War being an underrated rivalry. Territorial Cup, for those Big 12 fans who are not maybe as familiar with Arizona State, that is a really fun rivalry on both sides, basketball and football. And so, who knows? Iowa State and Farmageddon. I think Iowa State's got a hard game against Kansas State. I think Kansas State's a really good team. So I could see either of those paths happening for us, or who knows, maybe even both. But I do have to say that Houston coming against BYU, I know BYU is reeling right now, but Houston's going to have to really play their best game of the season with nothing really on the line in order to keep BYU out of the Big 12 championship. So we are down, but not out. I don't know if you guys want to give some thoughts really quickly about those kinds of situations, but considering all things that happened, and I meant to do this, our special teams, our anti-Q Wealth Management special teams player of the game is Cole Becker at Utah, who, for those of you who know, was the kicker here at Colorado. He's frankly pretty good. Transfers to Utah because he's a coward, and proceeds to miss the game-winning field goal that we really needed him to make to really help us with our Big 12 championship odds. So had to throw that out there. Had to throw some shade out at him because I know he's a loyal listener of our podcast. So anyway, Sreyas, Topher, any thoughts on the Big 12 situation?
Yeah, I think so. I think that Houston BYU game is going to be interesting because Houston's offense has been really off this year. And I think that they've shuffled through a couple different quarterbacks, and they've struggled actually pretty much every week to score. But they have a nice little defense, man. Their defense, so Baylor, we know Baylor's offense has been explosive this year. They limited Baylor pretty well this past weekend. And honestly, losing to Baylor right now, Baylor and Kansas, it's actually very fitting that they're ending the season playing against each other. Those are two teams that at the start of at the very beginning of the conference season, everyone was like pretty much wrote off, especially Baylor because they were coming off such a bad year. Kansas was at least coming off a good year where they had some level of expectation, but Houston played Baylor pretty tough, and we know Sawyer Robertson and that offense is pretty stout. So with how much BYU is probably reeling, it's a game to watch. I'm not saying that they're definitely going to win. But it's definitely a game to watch. I wouldn't call that a free win for sure. And then, Territorial Cup, that one, I understand it's a rivalry game. Anything can happen in a rivalry game though, but man, Arizona's defense looks bad. So speaking of, I think this is the time of year where defenses can rattle teams and make weird things happen. And boy, Arizona looks like they're not playing with much pride. I hope that they do for our sake, but overall, I'm just glad that we have a chance because at the moment that game ended, it felt so deflating. Like, oh man, that's it. That was it. That was our best chance to make this put a magical capstone on this incredible turnaround for this program. And we just let it slide, and it hurts. But we got a chance. And I love that we get to play. I think we're the first game of all of them because we're 10 a.m. on Friday. So get it out of the way early. for better or for worse. I hope for better. I hope we can go limit Ollie Gordon. I know we're going to go preview that. But get that win and then just get the popcorn out.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll do the preview coming up against Oklahoma State, who is 0-9 in conference play, which is just crazy because
0-8.
0-8, excuse me, about to be 0-9 in conference play. I was really hot on them at the beginning of the season. They were actually, if I remember correctly, my pick to win the Big 12. So shows what I know. I will point out that Oklahoma State does have a win over the vaunted SEC that is supposedly so much better than the Big 12 in beating Arkansas, who, and by the way, Arkansas beat Tennessee. So it kind of goes to show you how illegitimate the SEC's superiority complex is. But kind of the highlights going into this game, Ollie Gordon was supposed to be like a Heisman contender kind of running back. He's been good, not great, 186 carries, 870 yards and 13 touchdowns this year. Certainly, I mean, that's a fine season. That isn't by no means a spectacular season. But the big headline for Oklahoma State going into this game is they're going to have their true freshman quarterback coming in, who I believe played in their game against Texas Tech as well. I'm not even going to try to pronounce his first name, but last name is Smith. And yeah, Oklahoma State put up a lot of points against Texas Tech. They lost in a shootout 56-48 coming into Boulder. So I know Sreyas is going to agree with me on this. I hate when these second string quarterbacks come into Folsom Field and play us. And part of that is, we've got a bad history with it, but we're letting go of hell. So we're not going to talk about that. Vegas has this one as Colorado with a heavy favorite, minus 16.5, money line minus 800 with an over under quite high at 64.5 points. I can go ahead and give my prediction first. I think we win. I do not think we cover on this one. And maybe this is me, kind of like Coach Prime said about the team. Last week, I said we were going to beat Kansas by 30 points, that we had the best defense in the Big 12, and then we proceeded to put on that performance. So, thank God we didn't clip that and put that on Twitter, because I would have gotten absolutely eaten alive for that one, and I would have deserved it. But I think Oklahoma State's got something with this younger quarterback. Bowman was their quarterback before, and he was frankly terrible. Jameis Winston, like stats, 16 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. And so I think this is going to come down to, can our defense keep us in the game and have a bounce back game? I think this game is going to be personal. I think this game is going to get ugly. I think this team is going to show up for the crowd and put on a good senior night for, not really a senior, but for Shedeur and for Travis and, for a lot of these guys, and even Shiloh. So I think we're going to win. I think it's going to be actually probably an under on this one. And I think it's going to be a little bit of a rock fight. I think it's going to be close, but I think Colorado's going to end up with the win. And then we'll have to, like you said, Sreyas, we're going to have to sit back and hope that things go our way. But you know what? Even if they don't, we're still going to a bowl game. I hope everyone got their ticket requests in, because I think the deadline's either on Monday, so tomorrow, or already passed. But that's my prediction. I am not as bullish as I was last week, and I'm hoping you guys are more bullish than I am.
Yeah, this has a feel of a game that is going to be closer than it should be. And I think the other feeling that kind of leans me in that direction is the Texas Tech Oklahoma State game this past weekend. It was an absolute shootout. So we can see that the new quarterback, who looks like, I found the pronunciations, Maya Liuwaki Smith.
And that is why I was not going to try to pronounce it. So thank you, Sreyas.
He had a great game against Texas Tech, and when it comes to kind of revitalizing your team and giving them something to play for, there's nothing like having a freshman quarterback come in, play pretty well. We actually kind of saw it last year a little bit with Noah Fifita at Arizona. So I don't remember who Arizona's starting quarterback was at the very beginning of the year, but when they put in Fifita, there was just a new energy with that team, and they rode it all the way to 10 wins, and they win the Alamo Bowl. They won a pretty major bowl game, I think, against Oklahoma. So obviously didn't pan out that way for them this year, but with Oklahoma State, they might be feeling pretty good. They still got their he's not going to be a Doak Walker candidate this year, but I think didn't he win the Doak Walker last year, guys? I mean, Ollie Gordon is legit. He's definitely got a pretty major future ahead of him. So with respect to that, this does have a feel of a game that's going to be closer than it should be. But I'm fully letting go of hell. I'm not going to invoke any of the demons of the past. I say 42-21 Buffs. Our offense gets out to a big lead. and then basically forces them to pass the ball, which is something that they typically don't want to have to do. Maybe with their new quarterback that they'll try to head in that direction a little bit more. But I like the idea of getting out to a big lead and kind of ending the regular season on a high note, no matter what happens on Saturday.
Gentlemen, you keep talking about the Tech game and how good this quarterback looked. Let me ask you, who is the worst pass defense in all of FBS right now?
Yeah, it's Tech.
It's actually not Tech. It's Tulsa. But the second worst pass defense in all of FBS is
wow,
Tech.
he really set you up for that
me.
one there, Sreyas. That's brutal.
Yeah, anyone's going to look good on pass when they're passing the ball against Texas Tech, right? An FCS team that couldn't throw for over 200 yards against the University of Northern Colorado Bears threw for over 400 yards against Texas Tech, okay? This kid has to prove it. We have legitimate NFL level DBs on our team. Texas Tech has a bunch of guys that are athletic and played football in high school. There's levels to this. This kid is going to struggle on Friday. It's an early morning game. Welcome to Colorado. It's going to be cold. And if you're going to have to throw it on us, you better not throw it to Travis Hunter because that's going to be a pick. And I'm assuming we get Preston Hodge back this Friday. So if we have Hodge back, Hood's looking great. DJ McKinney's looking for a bounce-back game. I'm expecting 2 or 3 picks this Friday, and I think we absolutely roll it. The real question is over-under, can the Buffs cover that by themselves? I really do not think that Oklahoma State will give us any sort of challenge for this defense.
Wow. I'm glad I went first because I certainly don't want to follow that. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Please give us a follow on YouTube. For those of you still listening on Podbean, we really appreciate, on podcasting platforms, we really appreciate it. Give us a follow, Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, the whole 9 yards. We're still working out how to use our new recording platform with the outro music, so just pretend that it's there, and we'll see you guys next week after a huge win against Oklahoma State and finding out, hopefully while we're recording, that we are Big 12 championship bound. Until then, Go Buffs.
Go Buffs, baby.
Buffs.